Hey there, chat room.
What's up, guys?
Hello.
So we decided to get together a little bit to kind of talk about WoW Legion, the new expansion that was revealed today. So figured we'd kind of just get together with some of us there on BlizzPro. We've been talking about this for basically all week, and man, it's a pretty exciting day, that's for sure. So anyway, I'm Eldorian from BlizzPro, one of the co-founders of BlizzPro, and I am joined by I just learned that her name was Kitchen the other day. Uh, is that really what you go by?
Yeah,
All
more
right.
often than not, I get called Kitchen.
So Kitchen Wow, she is a co-host on The Edge, and is a pretty popular Twitch streamer, I believe. I've seen you live stream a few times at least.
Once in a blue moon.
Yeah. And then and then I'm also joined by Kevin, aka Lack of Realism, on Twitter. He is one of my co-hosts on the Well Met podcast. So, how's it going, Kevin?
It's good, man. I'm pretty stoked. I'm surprised at just how massive this announcement was and how much stuff there is to talk about.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And then Unlimited Black Crow, as you guys will know him, he had a bit of a small emergency he had to attend to, and he should be back maybe before we're done. So there's some lore stuff I definitely want to kind of talk to him about. So first things first, the reason why you guys came here, and the reason why you're watching this, is you wanted our first thoughts on this expansion. So we had the big reveal today. We knew, Gamescom, big thing. It wasn't going to be announced at BlizzCon here in a couple weeks. And so it's kind of a different venue, very different for Blizzard to do. This is the first time that WoW expansion has not been revealed at BlizzCon. So going into this, I'm curious. I'll start off with Kevin. I'm curious going into this, what did you think was going to happen today?
I mean, that's a hard question, right? We've been speculating about what this expansion could or could not have been for months, if not years, really, because the progression of the story after Wrath of the Lich King was sort of left open-ended. We didn't really know. There was no natural next villain, natural next place to go. And ever since then, it's just been surprise after surprise, right? Cataclysm with Deathwing coming up out of nowhere, finally putting that to rest, only to turn around and find out that Pandaria is emerging, which started as an April Fool's joke and a gag from Warcraft 3, and then Warlords, which turned everything on its ear and has us left, I think, still with more questions than answers about time travel and alternate universes and stuff. So I'm going to not get into that right now. But honestly, I think that today's announcement had everything, which is sort of the scariest part for me. Everybody said, oh, it might be South Seas. It might be the Emerald Dream, right? It might be and all of those things. We have to follow Gul'dan, fight through the Emerald Dream, deal with the threat of all the things going on in the South Seas area. Like, it's all of it. All of it happened all at once.
Right.
That's, to me, unreal.
Yeah, no, and it surprised me that, like, just how much stuff that they were able to reveal here. It was just kind of crazy. Especially, like, this has felt like BlizzCon. This week has felt like BlizzCon. And it makes me sad because I'm not at BlizzCon. What do you think, Kitchen? Is that what you want me to call you, as Kitchen, or do you want me to call you something else?
KT's fine.
KT, what do you think,
usual.
KT?
I am like, I had glimpses of, oh my god, you're going to completely be blown away by what was announced today. I didn't realize to what level that really meant. There's fan service everywhere. just bits and pieces, even jokes like "I have a Shara, ha ha ha." It was a trademark. No, no, it really wasn't. But they still threw it in there, which I think is kind of funny. We're getting all those things that people have been tweeting and posting and blogging about for months. What's going to come next after Warlords, because it's so mind-boggling left field. But it also makes me wonder, how are we going to follow this up? Like, that's where my mind's already going next, is what are we doing after Legion? But for right now, I can't I can't get it all.
What were your thoughts going into? Like, what did you think it was possibly going to be, or did you have any idea? Because I felt like a lot of people, I felt like we kind of went into this blind. That we didn't really know, like, we didn't really have any hooks on what this expansion could be. And I was wondering what you thought if you thought it was going to be this, or did you think it would be something else?
I thought it would be Legion related just because of the way that the Hellfire Citadel ended. You can't build to Gul'dan that deeply and not go with it and not let it lead into something. So I didn't expect Ajara or Water simply because of how poorly, like, not Ajara, the Water.
Pasture.
Vashir, thank you, was received then. They weren't going to do that again. You know, making people sick and people hating it and navigation being poor, which sucks because I actually really like that zone. But I understand other people's concerns with it. So they would have had to make something watery feel like it was still on land. And no. And the same thing with like having Naga be playable. There's so many issues with that it just didn't feel like a good way. So Legion feels good. It's very deep and you know, kind of running in the background. We really get to face it full on in a much more sinister fashion, and I'm excited.
Yeah, and we saw that hook from Gul'dan going into you know, kind of facing Illidan in a way. Not really facing, but like I'm not exactly sure. Was he... Maybe you guys know the lore a little bit better than I do, but was he basically going in the Warden prison and freeing Illidan? Or do we really know what was going on there?
I think the only thing that's firm at this point is, as far as the timeline is concerned, is that Gul'dan went into the Warden's prison before the events of Hellfire Citadel. So that's something that has occurred already. Which is why they sort of build it as like a cinematic teaser and not as the actual trailer for the expansion, because that's sort of like a carryover to get us from A to B, right? Yeah. So we're
it's
not
filling
100%...
in the gap without putting it in a book.
Right, and we don't know at this point what timeline or universe that occurs in. Presumably it occurs in ours, because that prison should be, in theory, back in Azeroth in the standard timeline. So he has somehow gone through, done that, come back, none of which we really have enough information, honestly, to answer, I don't think.
Right. So Illidan's back, and I have some thoughts about that, because last time we saw Illidan was in Burning Crusade, and we killed him. But now he's back, and people are like, well, is this the same Illidan that we saw? Is this the same Illidan in our world, or is it the Illidan from, you know, the alternate universe? And the thing is, like, Illidan became a demon, and if I understand the lore correctly, like, demons cannot be killed. So Illidan in our world is the same as Illidan in the alternate dimension, just like Archimonde in our world was the same Archimonde in the alternate dimension. So with Illidan becoming a demon, it's just straight up Illidan. And that's the way that I understand it. Would you guys agree with that, or do you have any interest in that at all?
I feel like the way that Illidan's playing out as being a demon is kind of like how Sargeras used to be a Titan and now he's a demon. Like it's got similar tones to it. And that also answers the question of how much of a demon really was Illidan. Apparently enough that he couldn't die, and that reflects back on those really left field tweets from Afrasiabi a couple months ago about how the Nether is all connected to all the universes and timelines and realms, and even when you kill those demons, they're not dead. It almost feels like there's a, I guess for lack of a better term, the demon side is almost like a sewer system for all the universes, and can kind of poke up at any time. But obviously there's something unique about our Azeroth, our Draenor, our Outlands that draws them there, that they make that their point of attack instead of another realm. But because the door's open, we're pulling people, and that includes this Khadgar that we see with Datish. We don't know what happened to Jaina. Why doesn't she have the staff? The Kirin Tor and everything. So it blows some doors open in a weird way.
Yeah, the artifact weapons, we'll get to those in a little bit. That has some interesting things about it in the lore that definitely raises some questions for sure. But we'll get back with if Crow gets back. I definitely want to talk to him a little bit about Illidan, and because I know that he has some very strong feelings about some of this. But anyway, like the presentation, we saw it. Like we didn't see Chris Metz in there. We didn't see Mike Morhaime there. You know, these are the people that we almost always see, you know, at BlizzCon announcing this kind of event. You know, we didn't have Chris Metzen's energy. Instead, we had Alex Afrasiabi, Ian Hazakostas, Tom Chilton. And what were your guys' thoughts? I'll start with you, Kevin. What were your thoughts on the presentation at BlizzCon?
At Gamescom, you mean?
Gamescom.
Yeah.
I keep messing up. Sorry. BlizzCon,
That's
Gamescom.
because, like you said, it really does.
Yeah.
Feel like Blizz. Honestly, I thought it was good. I heard a lot of commentary on like the pacing and sort of the level of excitement versus having been at a BlizzCon where it would have been a room full of 25,000 just insane cheering people. But I mean, fundamentally, I thought they did a really great job of it. To me, it was kind of like this is obviously a bit of a slow roll reveal, right? This isn't like with Warlords or I mean, I remember back to the original announcement of Wrath at BlizzCon in 07. And it was like, they just laid it all on the table. Here's everything there is to know about this expansion and when you can expect it, right? And it was all one big package. Blizzard's PR machine now is a big beast, and it moves a lot slower. So I think we're going to get pieces of information about Legion over the next probably 3 or 4 months, right into BlizzCon season. It's not like we know everything. We know very little, honestly, about this expansion right now. So I thought it worked out really well. Like I thought they did a really good job of sort of giving us some high note stuff, focusing on the fun features that they have fleshed out enough to really give some hooks to players about what to look forward to, which is why they really focused on like, here's how we're going to go back and make dungeons awesome. Here's the cool new artifact system. Look at how awesome these things are going to look. We're going to fix honor in a big way and finally create a PvE and PvP divide, which is something people have been asking for since arenas were created in Burning Crusade. Like all of those things are mammoth improvements to the game that they can speak to right now without having to have a lot of like super nitty-gritty details worked out. Even the like talents and stuff they were showing for the PvP system aren't final, right? That stuff's all in dev still. It's just what can they tell us today that builds a ton of hype and buys us some time before we move forward?
Do you feel like that lack of specificity is going to lead to stuff being left on the cutting room floor like Warlords again, or do you think they're too scared to cut things?
I mean, I can't imagine that they would ever cut on the same scale again. And the stuff they showcased today is, I think, by and large, finished, right? The number pruning and tuning that needs to happen to make them work is on the table as far as, like, what things do the different weapons get to unlock as talents, or what things are going to be, the options for your talent structure in PvP. But you don't go and talk about adding a prestige system and how that's going to unlock vanity things in your already finished artifact system without knowing that that's done. Like, I'm confident that the guys working on that stuff have finished those tasks, and now it's up to the Celestalons of the world to go through and play with numbers, and the Holinkas of the world to go through and say, okay, wait, no, that's not going to fly in an actual balanced PvP environment. But the core concepts, yeah, I mean, I think those are... They wouldn't have given us as much detail today as they did if they weren't already done.
Right. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I hope that they don't cut as much as they did with Warlords, and I feel like this has been the expansion that they have been working on for quite some time, because just based on what they had to cut from Warlords, and just only having like one major content patch, really. I mean, because I don't feel you can call patch 6.1 a major content patch. Yeah. It feels like they had to have been working on something else, and that this expansion was hopefully what they were working on, and hopefully that the stuff that they said today will see the light of day, especially with beta hitting this year. That tells me that they're a lot closer than probably what we're giving them credit for. Would either of you agree with that, or?
Totally, yeah. I mean, I imagine that they want this game to be, to have a release date that lands sometime in early 2016. Like, Burning Crusade launched end of January back in 2007, and I could see them trying to hit roughly that same time frame so that we get Legion in the sort of like, you know, 15, 16 month window after Warlords came out. Sooner than that, and there's going to be people who are upset about the like sticker shock of having to buy another box. But broadly speaking, yeah, I mean, I think they want this in our hands ASAP, and I can't imagine what they could like. This is the first expansion where I really feel like they've decided, hey, you know what we're gonna do? We're just gonna focus on gameplay, lore, whatever. You know, worrying about a consistent rule set between PvE and PvP, whatever. Like, let's just make the game as much fun to play as we can and hash out the other details on the other side. And that, to me, suggests that the design guys have finally had a chance to say, like, no, put your foot down. We've done time travel. Lore is all helter-skelter anyways. Like, let's make it awesome and just do that.
Right. So, moving forward, so one of the things that we learned about the expansion, not only is Illidan basically coming back, but we have a new hero class, similar to Death Knights, with Arthas. Now we have Illidan's crew of the Demon Hunters. Some of the information that we got about the Demon Hunters is, one, that only elves can be Demon Hunters, so you got Night Elves and Blood Elves, and that's it. And you're going to have 2 specs. I don't remember what they were off the top of my head. Other than
Havoc and Vengeance, I think.
Havoc and Vengeance. I believe Havoc was the DPS spec, and Vengeance was the tanking spec. What we weren't told was what level they would start at. And I believe that Blizzard deliberately left that out because I don't know if they're entirely sure. And that's probably why they left it out. What are your guys'...
We'll hear on Sunday.
Yeah, I guess they will have some revealing to do on Sunday. Hopefully that's one of the things we will learn. What do you think of the Demon Hunters, KT?
If I wasn't so excited about some of the class identity, like specific of, oh, you're not just a mage, you're a mage kind of thing, I would really, really consider re-rolling my main. But yeah, it looks awesome. I'm still trying to wipe awesome. the drool away. No, but they look beautiful. I love the fact that hey, it is just off of the Blood and the Night Elf model. Like I know people are like, I want to be a gnome demon hunter. Seriously?
Yeah. Right.
No, I'm sorry, but no. No Maragon forever can, calm down in the corner and sit this one out, sort of thing. But it looks great. The abilities look awesome. I appreciate the fact that they went, hey, we don't have to have 3 specs just because everybody else does. We got boom DPS, boom tanking, and that's awesome. Like, that kind of decisive action is really good, and I think it'll play out really well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the 2 specs. It's like they said, it's like, well, we could have done 3, could have had 2 DPS specs and a tank spec, or we could have had 2 tank specs and a DPS spec, but why not just have 2 and then just put all the cool stuff in both those specs? I wish they would have done that with some of the other classes in the past. I'm a big fan of it. What do you think, Kevin?
I think it's awesome. I mean, I love the huge focus on, for Death Knights particularly, or sorry, Demon Hunters. So I have such a huge problem with that, because to me, Death Knights are the hero class. And I also made a joke earlier on Twitter about how the definition of a hero class is just any class that has a 2-word name, apparently. All the other classes are 1, all the hero classes are 2. But I love it. I mean, I think the mobility focus that Demon Hunters got is super cool. The fact that we're getting something that, is new in Spectral Sight, and we don't know how that's going to work in game yet, but like the ability to see around obstacles is something they haven't done in the WoW engine before, other than like some very specific quest related things, or like the vision gizmos in Arena at one point in time. So like, I think it's going to be a really fun class to play. I think there's a lot of awesome things about it. And the 2 spec thing, honestly, I hope is the first sign that maybe they're considering going back and making a similar change to some of the other classes. I mean, we don't probably need to have 3 unique separate DPS specs on pure DPS classes, right? I mean, some of them there's a lot of identity tied into them, but like I play a Death Knight personally, and the difference between Frost and Unholy is you pick whichever one does better damage at any given time. It was different when the class had an identity built around every spec could tank or DPS, but now, no, like this is a huge step forward in terms of like design space in my mind, and I kind of hope that they apply some similar logic to the rest of the game as time goes on. I don't love the racial thing, and I know that like from a lore perspective it only makes sense that elves would be demon hunters and whatever else. I think that's at this point kind of silly. Like they've gone the other direction with every other class where they've slowly relaxed those expectations. They're like, yeah, make a blood elf warrior, nobody cares. Like we finally got away from that, and to go back to it now seems odd, especially when we don't know how they're going to handle things like racial balance, which I know is not a huge thing anymore, but will bother some people. Like, why do we care? I'm going to be able to go cross-faction in PvP with mercenary mode. I'm going to be able to do all these things. Like, why do I care if my demon hunter, see, I just did it again, is a gnome or a tauren? Like, who cares?
I think the people that care would be those that are really into the lore, and, well, you know, demon hunters can only be elves, yada, yada, yada. Granted, they could make exceptions, but for me, it just kind of felt right that was the case. I feel like it would look really, really silly, as KT said earlier, to see a gnome demon hunter, you know, or a tauren demon hunter, or something like that. I'm sure that it was a design decision that they probably had a lot of discussion around, and they probably came to this conclusion. They were probably thinking of adding more, but in the end, this is probably, I'm guessing, what felt right, because it's what feels right to me, at least.
Sure, and I mean, honestly, it's probably good for the game in the short term, but in the long term, like, I'm calling it now, they will backwalk this later. And in the next expansion, I will be able to roll a human demon hunter. Like, they will eventually walk away from the restrictions, because they've done that with every other class and spec and race combination and all the way through the game's lifespan.
That could be an interesting aspect depending on how the story for this plays out. Another thing to take into consideration is just the sheer investment in art assets for making those complex forms for every race is costly and time consuming. I'm sorry, but I'd rather see more badass weapons in another dungeon from the art team than I would a couple more races. But I play like 99% Blood Elves anyway, so I'm just kind of like, meh, sorry guys, I just don't care. The other thing is that like one of the Night Elf forms on the male looked very, very Dranic, and I don't think that's by mistake, but people would be thoroughly not okay with there being 2 alliance options and 1 horde. So cut Draenei, just go with 1 and 1, see how it plays out, and throw it in on the back end if people really want some diversification. But the way that the story kind of plays out right now, having elves makes sense, and also from a budgeting perspective, throwing teams that are working on that stuff in a different area is the wiser decision, because the criticism on Warlords is everything's so tight, there's not a lot to do. Well, for throwing art teams on things to do, that's a better decision in the long run.
Right. Yeah, totally. So, moving on to a little bit past the Demon Hunters now, some of the other things that we learned is that the level cap's going to be up to 110, so we're getting into those even crazier numbers now past level 100. And then you're going to be able to, if you pre-purchase or purchase, I guess, you're going to be able to they're going to do the whole boost level thing again. So you'll be able to boost a character up to level 100 instead of the level 90 that you can. I'm expecting that will probably be, there's no details about this, but I'm assuming it will probably be the same purchase that you currently make. They'll just bump it up to 100 instead of 90. Probably be the same $60, I'm assuming, if you want to buy an individual one down the road. There's no confirmation on that, but that's just what I'm assuming will probably happen. But the one of the other big things that they really talked about and it's been a lot of discussion about, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, is the weapon artifacts that they're doing. Kevin, can you tell us a little bit about what the weapon artifacts are and what they're gonna bring to the game?
Right. So basically, what we know right now is every spec. Right. So within every class, every unique spec is actually going to have access to a totally specific weapon, drawing on some of the really awesome things that come forward from the lore and history of the game that they're going to be able to upgrade as their power level advances on their character, transmogrify and modify the appearance of to fit the sort of flavor of your character and preference of style. And it's going to provide a kind of what appears to be kind of an alternate advancement option for your character, where the weapon itself will have a little old school talent tree where you can unlock new features and continue your character's progression through the weapon itself, which opens a lot of questions about, are we just treating weapons as kind of no longer a loot slot? Are we not going to worry about getting weapons in raids as drops or in dungeons? Everyone's just going to use their artifact instead. And I think that's fine, but it's something we don't know. What we do know is that we have these super awesome, very customizable weapons. There's going to be a little bit of interplay with both PvE and PvP in terms of their design and how they're going to look. They're going to be useful by extension, one assumes, in both. And they're going to be epic, awesome things that have a ton of sort of rich lore and flavor from other parts of the game. We saw Ashbringer, Doomhammer, trying to think which other like really iconic. The Frost Death Knights are going to be able to go collect the shards of Frostmourne and turn it into two separate weapons. Like, that's all super awesome. And for people who have any interest in the story or liked the old school class quests, whether it was, Warlock Green Fire or all the way back to like Benediction Anathema for priests way back in Vanilla WoW, like, these were things that people really enjoyed and gave you a sense of identity for your character. And I'm super, super excited that they're bringing them back.
Yeah, no, I was totally shocked when I saw, your character is now going to be able to wield Doomhammer. Your character is now going to be able to wield Ashbringer. That just totally surprised me because those felt like weapons that have such a rich history around them that they were meant for these characters that you see, these NPCs that, are these huge heroes that you follow around. And I was really surprised to see now everybody's going to have them. KT, what do you think of these weapon artifacts?
They're shiny. What the way that they kind of progress reminds me of something that was introduced in Rift. I don't know if you guys ever played that game. I was not happy with Cataclysm, and I took a small break and played Rift for about 6 or 8 months, and got very heavy into the raiding and very heavy into the PvP. And it's actually kind of funny that things that I really wasn't a fan of with how Warcraft did them, but loved how Rift did, is trickling into WoW now. Like, they're taking it and they're cleaning it up and they're making it look nicer. And there was I don't even remember what it was called, but basically you would gain XP like you normally would as you were leveling after you hit max level, and you would have these tiers that you could go throw into for stats, and you could pick whatever you wanted. So, whatever would benefit your class and your spec at that time. So I like this. It's way more tuned for, I'm a fire mage, I'm going to fire all the things. And so I like it. And, from an aesthetic point, they're beautiful, they're iconic, they create deeper identity with your main. And I don't play my alts much. Like, I always had alt slaves to feed my main, but I never really got into playing them too terribly much, I think, with the exception of my Death Knight, which I hated when I first played, but kind of fell in love with afterwards. Yeah, she's my second. Don't worry, don't scoff. Don't scoff.
All right.
But yeah, so just feeding into that identity, and that's kind of like one of those things that people know me for in social media is that, hey, I'm a fire mage. So being able to just display that on a greater level and like character ability power perspective is awesome. So I like it.
The one thing that I do sort of immediately worry about is whether or not it will be alt friendly. I feel like that was a big criticism of the legendary system in Warlords, was that it's wickedly unfriendly to alts. No catch up mechanisms that were meaningful were introduced, and it made it really hard for you to play a second character or switch characters. You felt that you were sort of gated by the progression of collecting the different items from each of the raid instances, and there's a really hard limit on how quickly you can achieve that.
I thought the ramp up for alts was actually pretty good for the legendary. The thing that really bones alts for warlords is the garrison. Like that's dropping 40,000 gold and tons of hours into getting that caught up. But the legendary mechanic should have been you were gaining the shards and the runes and everything a lot faster.
Maybe. I felt personally like it really, now I have my legendary ring finished on my Death Knight, and I'm on the end of the Heimel or beginning of the BRF sequence on my Shaman, and midway through the BRF sequence on my Monk, and there's no way I could go and finish either of those characters. Plus, I'm losing time that I could be getting upgrades to my ring every week with the way they added the sort of Archimon kill subsequent upgrade thing. It's something that just sort of said they didn't want you to switch characters or play other characters, and the garrisons, I think, in some ways amplify that. They make it just worse to try and manage multiple characters. It also makes me wonder what's going to happen to legendaries in general. Like, do we just park the concept of legendaries and say we're not doing legendary items in Legion? Are they gone? Are we just going to have artifacts? That's is what it kind of looks like.
That's what it feels like to me. I mean, just all of the artwork that they're putting into these weapons. I mean, they're 36 different weapons because there's 36 different specs based on all of the classes, right?
Right.
And from what they've shown, like all of them are really phenomenal looking, and you're gonna have, not only are they gonna look great, but they're gonna have, each one of those are probably going to have, some kind of special effects as well that you're going to have to do. So can you imagine like wielding one of those fire Ashbringers and what that's gonna look like? So it's gonna be pretty awesome, in my opinion. So
makes me wonder about something KT said earlier too, about where do we go after this. If I as a character can wield Ashbringer now, what am I going to replace Ashbringer with? Like, conceptually, that just feels like that's wrong.
Right.
So we said all along, it's always been like place, but that's a kind of an upper boundary on, holy shit, I'm going to wield the Doomhammer, be able to turn it into like one of 7 different visual Doomhammers, and then, nope, you can get something off of a trash mob in WoW X7 that's better.
Right. That's my envision, is you're going to have this awesome, you're going to have the Doomhammer, and then in WoW Expansion 7, you're going to kill like some mob, and it's going to be like, hey, here's this green weapon that no one's ever heard of, and it's better than the Doombringer, or the Doomhammer. Equipped.
Yeah, you're going to kill some, like, space kobold for a quest, turn it in, and yeah, who knows, right? Like, it's one of those things that power creep in this game has always really struggled with, and again, I don't really care. I want the game to be enjoyable, and if that comes at the expense of lore like that, sure.
Yeah, it's one of those where you still have to maintain a certain level of disconnect and disillusionment. We aren't actually our pixelated characters, so yeah, when the next bit of content comes out, we are going to set that weapon down for, a quest green and not think twice about it. Like, it feels bad when you do it, but 20 minutes later you forget you even did it, except for maybe like, oh, I kind of missed my spell effect thingy. Oh, sad.
But it makes me wonder if that's like a transmog you'll be able to keep or something like that, so that your weapon will always end up looking like that if you choose to.
Since it's not a legendary, it's definitely possible. Well, plus they're overhauling transmog anyway, so that, pack ratting can be did away with a bit.
Right. And we don't know. I mean, we just finished saying that if this artifact is going to be the lone weapon that you carry with you throughout the course of this expansion, there's truly nothing stopping them from letting you upgrade it and have it be the weapon you carry through the next expansion. If you've got 7 or 8 different styles of new art that it can change to or be different with over the course of time. I mean, I play a Death Knight. All I carry around is one big sword all the time, anyways. If it's the same big sword and I get to change its artwork and enchants and other things over the course of the next 2 or 3 expansions, like, okay, doesn't really bother me.
Yeah. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being meh and 10 being super super excited, how excited are you guys for the weapon artifacts? Then either one.
Like a 7, maybe an 8. I want to know more about them. I'm hoping that they release some details on what each spec gets and a little bit more about how they're going to work, because some of the stuff they showcased today was really cool, but it's just hard to be excited about it when you basically spent the whole time talking about Ashbringer for Ret Paladins.
Right.
Aesthetically, a 10. They're beautiful, but yeah, I agree. I want to know how is this going to serve me throughout the expansion. And I know some people kind of complain of like, oh, like the problem with the cloaks and mists of, oh, we always had the cape and blah 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 blah, and we never did anything else, so why was there loot for it except for the once in a blue moon person that didn't have it, or a very casual player. But how many people transmog stuff anyway? Like, I've gone through a ton of different swords in Warlords, and I still have it transmogged to the Horseman's Baleful Blade.
Yeah.
Because I like the way it looks. So, I don't know. It just depends on how that item is going to progress, like stat-wise, item level-wise, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, okay, so I think we're done with the weapon artifacts a little bit, but going on, I want to talk a little bit about one of the other new features that they've revealed a little bit, and that's class orders. And Gesundheit, whoever that was. But I feel... actually, KT, can you describe a little bit about what class orders are and what they showed?
So what it kind of feels like is taking the player housing guild hall that people have been, whining and complaining and throwing fits about, but doing it in a way that isn't going to be abused by toxic guilds and toxic leadership. It's you identify with your class instead of your guild, and the artwork is geared towards whatever class you are, and you're going to be sitting and probably associating, with your fellow mages, with your fellow Death Knights, and looking more like Acaris does for the Death Knights. They laid that out actually as a specific example. So that's a cool floating citadel. It might be off in left field to get back and forth to, but it reinforces that identity.
Yeah, one of the things that they talked about was how, like, you'd have... And you guys might correct me if I'm wrong on this. At this point in the presentation... I was busy putting some stuff together and I wasn't paying a huge amount of attention to it at the time. But it sounded like it was something where you get followers, but the followers that you get, instead of sending them out, you would still maybe send them out to do stuff, but instead of just them returning back with rewards or something like that, they might come back with information on, hey, there's a guy here in a cave that you can go take out or something like that, and then you would go there and you would possibly get a reward for that, or possibly, hey, you might go kill something in a zone where your followers will give you a bonus for that zone or something like that to go there and kill this stuff. Is that pretty much how these are going to work? Because it sounded like to me like it was garrisons again, but in a much different sense.
Yeah, it looks like a more meaningful utilization of what followers we had. So there's going to be fewer, they're going to be more meaningful. You send them out and don't just, pick up your lockbox or something like that. They, like you said, they'll grant you buffs to the zone, or they uncover a new area for you to go into, which I wonder if maybe some of that stuff won't play out like some of the mini scenarios from Isle of Thunder or something, where you go out there and you run through and complete it. But yeah, it's more meaningful interaction with them just so long it isn't like the bodyguard that pulls everything. That's the only thing I'm really worried about is like how are we going to interact with them out in the field? Because I'm a mage and I'm a squish, and my bodyguards got me killed often, and I don't like them for that.
See it, and my example was totally going to be bodyguards. I think of the class order halls as being analogous to like a level 3 barracks. You're going to have a place that has some of your very highly trained followers that you can go hang out with, take out on missions with you, because they made it sound like these are, you know, characters that you want to have with you, that you go and do the quests, right? It's no longer about I sit in my garrison as the commander and tell everybody else where to go and what to do, and my followers are off on cool missions, and I'm, you know, putting my feet up and going through the junk salvage that they bring back. Like, that's backwards. I should be doing the fun stuff, and they should be opening the boxes. So it sounds like you get to be out in the world doing the cool stuff now with your smaller group of followers, and the class order hall becomes sort of like a secondary, almost like a secondary capital city, right? You're going to spend a lot of time in Dalaran, but you're also probably going to spend a lot of time in this class order hall, picking up special quests, doing things that are like unique to your class. It'll probably be where a lot of what happens with your artifact quests and stuff flows from, is that new class specific hub. And I think it's kind of like a tentative step towards something that eventually slows down the war between the factions. They'd sort of like quickly dropped in this reference. It was like, yeah, you're still, the Horde and Alliance are at each other's throats, but your class is not going to have that. You're going to communicate with all of the members of your class in this hall. I don't know if that means cross-faction communication. Don't quote me on that, but like everybody's going to get together and just work on the things that you need for your class. If that does sort of start us down the path where they say, you know what, like we don't need this fundamental back and forth core fight between the two factions as a theme of the game anymore, that would also be super cool in the long term, again, as a gameplay thing for like the social health of the game. So I think the class halls are like a testing ground for how do we keep using garrison technology, but also what can we do to move the needle a little bit on social features in the game, which is something they did say they were going to try to work on.
Yeah, and that's something that they're similarly working on with the whole being able to be a mercenary in PvP and being able to kind of fight with the other faction and stuff like that in a way, too. It's kind of balance that out a little bit. I think that was one of the things that they've been restricted on since day one of this game, because when they first designed World of Warcraft, I remember when it was in beta, it was a big thing that you could not talk, you know, even to the other faction, and they made it a really big deal that, you know, it was Horde versus Alliance, and they've always kind of stuck to that, but it feels like since, heck, Wrath of the Lich King, they've been kind of trying to move a little bit further away from that a little bit, and then they kind of brought it back in full force with Miss of Pandaria, but at some point, you know, especially with you know, the subscriber base being where it is at times, you know, having that separation probably isn't the best health for the game.
It's just kind of played out, right? And it feels like they've done a lot of stuff over the years where we see little tests, right? Like, can we try this thing? And I would say mercenary mode that's coming out in the 6.2 point whatever patch that's coming out here is kind of the same thing. Like, they're always doing these little tests for how can we solve problems that have emerged socially in the game with some kind of mechanical fix, right? KT's point earlier about not having guild halls and using class halls instead is exactly the same thing. Blizzard doesn't want to create an environment where the control of whether or not a feature is accessible to a player or not is in the hands of another player, which is exactly what a guild hall would have done. Saying it's class specific, it's now a core functionality of the game, and whether or not you're in a guild or whether or not your guild leader is a total piece of crap doesn't actually affect your ability to enjoy the game, right?
Yeah, yeah. So do you think with these class orders, do you think this will solve a lot of the problem that we currently have in World of Warcraft, along with exploring the world, interacting with other players? Because right now in Warlords, I mean, I stopped playing right before 6.2, is because I would log in, I would be in my garrison, I would do some garrison things, and then I would log out and I would never see another person in the game. It was like, hopping onto Farmville and playing a game by myself or something like that. Do you think these class orders will solve some of those issues that we've seen that happened with Warlords and even in some cases Miss Pandaria?
I mean, I'm hopeful that it will add a lot of content that you can enjoy by yourself, or like KT said, maybe something scenario-esque, so that you've got something going on at all times in the game. That's really what I think people felt with Garrisons, was that the most productive use of your time was log in, send some guys on a couple of missions, and if you don't have a major activity, right, like a raid or a raided battleground or something that you've planned with a big group of people, the impetus to go out and do more than that was really limited, right? The risk to reward ratio was way off. And that's not because it would have been more fun to do, World of Daily Craft, as they put it in the previous developer interviews. Like, no, they did a good thing with the garrisons that really gave you a good reason to log in, and then no reason to stay logged in. And I think the class order hall is now a place where they can add something that gives you a reason to stay logged in. This is where you're going to go to work on bettering your class, your artifact. There's going to be hopefully class-related quests and cool things. If they could add quest lines like the Green Fire one for Warlocks or stuff above and beyond the artifacts, they could create really great single-player content that could keep you invested in the game for the life cycle of a patch or the whole expansion, just with this class-driven content. And that would be awesome.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, no, yeah, totally. I agree as well. But so moving on to the next thing they were talking about was the new dungeons and raids. And they kind of felt like they haven't been doing a very good job with dungeons lately. And I believe the player base would wholeheartedly agree with that. That seems to be one of the major complaints in the last couple expansions, is that dungeons haven't really felt like they have mattered. So they're bringing a bunch of new ones in, including bringing back basically the Violet Hold, and they're kind of focusing on dungeons a little bit more. But one of the big things that I was really intrigued by was the first raid that's going to be out, and we're going to be going into the Emerald Nightmare. Originally, people were thinking that this was going to be the Emerald Dream expansion finally, but instead of making an entire expansion around the Emerald Dream, which I felt would have been a terrible expansion anyway if they had done that, it's now going to be a raid. You're going to actually be able to go into the Emerald Nightmare and go find Cenarius and take on face Xavius. KT, what do you think about the new dungeons and raids that they showed off? Because I know that you're pretty big into this kind of stuff, right?
I'm really excited for it. I think they really underestimated how much people really like the dungeons. They like the quick hits, and we weren't getting that. And people were running them, and they might have been complaining about, oh God, I have to run 7 dungeons to go get my badges for the week for my raid gear, yada, yada, yada. But it kept them running them, and it was something to do, something to go grab a couple friends, something to, like, when they first put in, like, Group Finder, I met somebody in Group Finder that, I was with for 5 years. Like, the social impact of just running dungeons can be really huge. And in Warlords, they took any reason to run them out after you got your gear, with the exception of challenge modes, for cosmetic stuff, or actually it was for beginning raid gear. Those were really, really important. And I ground hours and hours of challenge modes to get my stuff. But after that was done, after I was in High Mall and raiding, I haven't been in a 5-man since. So giving reason to go back in there, to make them meaningful, to give more than just, a bare minimum to kind of scoot people through is nice. I missed them. I wish they would bring back, like, the scenarios, because I am a DPS, and getting a 15-second queue for a scenario was nice also. So I like that they're acknowledging that those were meaningful to us and not just a tool to move on to rating.
Right. What do you think, Kevin?
I mean, I think small group content has always been the sort of heart of the social part of the game, right? The big constructs of like rated battlegrounds or big group raiding or all those things, like they're my primary source of entertainment in the game. Like I play the game to raid, but I always met new people, had great times, enjoyed the experience of doing small group content, whether that was some of the really good 5-mans that had a decent difficulty curve, right back like from everybody remembers having to do like the timed challenges back in the old TBC heroic dungeons, or the times that they met awesome people doing 5-mans, or even I'll go so far as 10-mans, right? Whether it was your Upper Blackrock Spires or Zulamon Bear runs, right? Like the small group content where you could get people together and do something that you could do in a short period of time with kind of a cobbled together group of people. They're some of the most enjoyable, memorable things the game has ever done. And they don't have to have really great rewards, right? You're running them for quest completion, you're running them for, currency, you're running them for something to do, right? And generally, even if all I was running them for was a way to like get my daily boost to my Claxy reputation or whatever else, like it's something that's fun. So I think having those fun things around is important. It's something that if there's an absence of that, you see it. You see it really obviously in the sort of state of the game when there's no fun social content.
And I just messed up everybody.
Did you ever? Look at that.
You killed us all, man. Killed us all.
Let me get that fixed real quick.
Yeah, but yeah, like because I was rating, Throne of Thunder and Siege of Orgrimmar heroic, is our now mythic, whatever. Like my main was so overgeared on those, I would just go to trade chat and be like, looking for 2 people to carry the hell out of because I need a heroic scenario queue or I need a normal scenario queue because I need my badges. And I would get people in greens and blues that were like, oh my god, thank you, you're the best thing ever, but I would make friends from that. And so it was a meaningful exchange that you weren't getting when you just queued or were running around doing dailies or standing in town trolling trade and equipping your legendaries because you can't transmog them. So yeah, you gotta remember that there is multiplayer in the MMO, and it almost feels like they forgot about that for a second, and so getting back into community is good. It's important. It's vital.
I think you see, and I'm not going to like project too much here, but I think you see a little bit of what the different developers really care about at any given time in what each expansion really brings to bear. The effort of the art team on all the new models and stuff and all the really great art assets that were added in Warlords came at an expense. It had to come from somewhere, right? The guys who are on the design team now are all super keen on high-end rating. They take high-end rating very seriously. The raids in Warlords have been some of the best, most interesting, most difficult that they've ever produced. And it's reflected in what we've been playing for a game. If the team that worked on Wrath of the Lich King is back in business, or if some of those people have gotten a chance to sort of like get back in the saddle and say, hey, you know what was awesome was adding 3 fresh 5-mans that were a lot of fun and helped tell the story of Arthas and all the things that were going on surrounding Icecrown. Like those were great, and adding that content over the life cycle of an expansion keeps bringing people back to try new things just for enjoyment's sake. Like they don't have to be reward driven.
Right. Hey, welcome back, Crow. You missed
Hey guys.
He's finally here. He had to go and run and do some things, and then when he came back, he messed up my entire overlay.
Damn it, Crow.
So I got that fixed.
I'm a creature of skill. Skill and amazement.
But no, Crow, we were just talking about the new dungeons and raids that are coming out, and we kind of went off on a little tangent, but at the beginning I was talking about how a lot of people were speculating that this expansion could possibly be the Emerald Dream, and we gotta admit that would be a pretty silly expansion to have, a whole expansion revolved around the Emerald Dream. But instead we have a new raid for the Emerald Nightmare, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, since you're kind of the lore guy around here.
What's really troublesome is that the most recent, the most substantial piece that's been written about the Emerald Nightmare is the novel Storm Rage that came out back during Wrath of the Lich King, coincidentally. It's actually one of the few WoW novels that I haven't read and I'm not super familiar with. So I know that throughout the classic game, there was this really long through line about stuff that's going on in the Emerald Dream. Why is Malfurion asleep? What is Fandral Staghelm up to, because it's shady. There's a lot of that was going on, and it never really got resolved until it actually got resolved in Storm Rage, where Fandral turns out to be a bad dude, and Vius is an evil tree in the nightmare somewhere. And I mean, ultimately it gets kind of confusing, and so I'm glad that now we really have this opportunity we're going to go into the nightmare, or we're going to be touching bits and pieces of the dream, pieces of the nightmare, and interacting with what's there. I think that's I wrote a long blog entry a couple days ago talking about how the dream itself, it has got too broad of a scope and also too focused of a scope to actually sustain an expansion, but doing it as a raid, and we're probably going to see a big portion of it in the questing zone where the raid's going to be located, which the name of it is escaping me right now. It's what is it? Valshara. Yeah. That's probably going to be a very the dream is probably going to be like very, very visible there, and I think that's going to be a really great move. I think it's going to deliver. I hope that it's going to deliver for what a lot of people have been after and asking for with an Emerald Dream expansion, because it's probably going to be 100% of what we're going to get that touches the dream directly. I'm fairly certain that's how that's going to play out.
Right. Actually, Crow, you're coming through like really, really choppy. I don't know. You might need to possibly restart Skype or something. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, cool. Let's do that. Why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Die.
So he's gonna mess up my overlay again.
It's okay. He's coming back. He's coming back.
He's coming back. He'll fix it then. So anyway, the Emerald Dream, I think, is pretty cool for a raid and everything. But one of the really exciting things that I think that hasn't really been changed since Burning Crusade is that there's going to be a new PvP system, a new honor system that's coming out. There's they called it Honor System version 3. The last time they changed the honor system was in Burning Crusade, where this time they are basically... It sounds like they're going to be basically able to balance PvE and PvP separately. Now, do any of you PvP?
Not recently. I mean, I did the big gladiator push back when Arena was new in season 3 or so, and I tried again at one point in the Mists. I was just playing it for fun for a while, but I mean, the impact it's had on the game has always been very visible, right? We've always been able to tell that, ability pruning was hugely driven by what was or wasn't good for PvP, changes to class balance as far as how abilities hit or what different people's interaction with crit and all those things has always been driven by PvP, and it's had a really messy impact on the game right from the get-go. I can remember doing the original Illidan fight and having people pick up resilience gear so they could off-tank in it because it manipulated crit value so you could become effectively a tank without using defense, which is also a stat that's no longer in the game. All of these things just fed into a system that was designed to keep PvE and PvP separate without ever just solving the problem. And it was never something that was actually clean and long-term. It was always iterative. Every expansion with new abilities, new spells, new stats, they had to find new ways to figure out, okay, how do we rejig everything to allow PvP and PvE to coexist? And now they just don't have to, which is awesome.
Right. And for those that weren't able to watch it, the system that they're basically doing is, how on PvE, or how on your character you have a talent system. And you can choose, on various levels, what skill to kind of take. Now they're introducing that skill basically for PvP. So now they will be able to scale fights and things like that in PvE and raids and dungeons, specifically for PvE activities. Whereas in PvP now, when you're in a battleground or you're fighting other players, you're going to have a different set, basically, of talents that you can choose from. And you'll be able to, then that allows them then to balance classes based on fighting other players now. So now you have two systems that are now completely different that you will be able to, balance specifically for that, instead of the PvE guys screwing things over and making an ability way strong against players. Now it's going to be different. And that's the way that I understood it. Tell me if I'm wrong or if I'm going down the right track.
I'm not sure if the PvE talents and the PvP talents are actually supposed to be mutually exclusive of one another. What it looked like to me is that as you accumulate honor, you'll unlock these PvP abilities that you can add that will then supplant PvE abilities that you have. So it'll change the game as you are progressively as you are doing more PvP, you will unlock more abilities that alter how your game plays in PvP, which is interesting because one of the things that they've said in the past is that they were really concerned about splitting up PvE and PvP because they wanted players to be able to cross over between those two game types seamlessly. They didn't want people to feel like, oh, if I don't PvP a whole bunch, then I'm not going to be able to PvP at all. But if I don't PvE as well, I'm not going to be able to raid as well. And it's just like, it's interesting to see them take this stance of saying, no, now if you PvP a whole bunch, you're going to have all of this stuff that's only going to work in PvP. And if you don't PvP at all, then none of it's going to matter. You can just raid and do all of your stuff in raiding and be happy and content with life. So it's an interesting stance. It's a reversal of a previous stance, and I think that's remarkable.
Right.
It leaves some unanswered questions, right? Like, we don't know at this point anything about gear acquisition and the model for how that will work, because they've always said that you should be able to more or less stick exclusively to the activities that you enjoy in the game. You shouldn't have to raid to get gear to do pet battles. Like, that would be counterintuitive and awful. But if you play...
Terrible.
Yeah, terrible. But if you PvP, you should be able to acquire gear through PvP that allows you to PvP. And the problem they're trying to solve at this point is basically the unnecessary power creep that was created by forcing PvP stats and effects onto gear instead of onto these talents. Now, all of the things that you got from these set bonuses in old PvP gear or PvP trinkets or any of the other kind of creep and scale that occurred in PvP can just get shifted onto the talent system, which means the gear will be, in theory, roughly analogous to the gear that you would get from anything else in the game. How that will work in terms of flow back and forth, unclear at this point. Like, can I go do PvP, get decent gear, and take it back to a raid because it's roughly equivalent? It's got more versatility and less crit or whatever. Like, that's, I think, kind of what the original PvP system way back when with the old arenas and stuff was kind of intended for. There was really good flow where, like, a good PvE weapon worked in PvP and a good PvP trinket was okay in PvE. And I think they can actually, by diversifying and having separate rule sets, allow more crossover, which seems, again, really counterintuitive, but makes a lot of sense when you stop and think about it. All of a sudden, you've taken all of the limiting factors about how you participate in either activity and removed them from gear. Gear is now just the progression that occurs naturally by doing whatever activity you enjoy. It could be one of the healthiest things they've done for PvP since they got rid of, like, the fixed arena team situation, which was also kind of a hot mess. Like, this is huge. It's a massive system change in the game.
Do you think this is going to bring a lot of players back that were interested in PvP that left because they weren't happy with the status of PvP in the last few years?
Maybe. I mean, a lot of the complaints about PvP have centered around how do you balance for PvP? How do you make it so that people can play competitively without the huge barrier to entry? They did a lot of work in Mists and into Warlords on, the immense amount of crowd control that had emerged and how to make it so that you felt like the game was interactive still and you still had, some effect on the outcome of the game. The huge sweeping changes to the healing paradigm, which were largely PvE driven for Mist and Warlords, had a real deleterious effect on PvP because it meant that no one ever died, right? There's no way to burst through a healer ever in Warlords PvP at the start. So I think there's still probably some fine tuning and balance tweaks that need to occur to make it really clean. But if they can showcase some of that and the PvP talents speak to how they're going to do that, I could see a lot of people going back and trying it, especially if that gear barrier to entry goes away. I as a player today now cannot go do PvP because I'm looking at 3 months of gear and point acquisition before I can even get started at a competitive level. If I could just jump in and go do it and have a shot and I can just unlock the different talents, that's awesome. Like, that really allows people to sort of get their foot in the door much quicker. And if the talent unlocks aren't awful, right, because presumably they're not going to be mandatory with the way that the prestige system works, that suggests to me that like the barrier to entry to PvP will be much lower. And I know that's something that Holinka and the PvP team have taken a lot of feedback on, is why don't you PvP? Why would you rather play Heroes of the Storm than do WoW Arena? It's the same concept and the same time commitment, but why are you choosing one over the other? And the barrier to entry thing is a consistent theme in the feedback they get.
So with this, any of you, all three of you, with these changes, because I have a feeling that none of us here really have PvP'd much. And,
no.
Yeah.
Not in the last couple expansions, anyway.
I think the last time
I've never had the time for it, honestly. It's not that I dislike PvP, because, like I said, when I was playing Rift, I was running more BGs than I was raiding, but raiding was also a lot harder to get groups together because it was such a smaller population, or raid teams disbanded after a month or two, if even. So there was a lot more open-ended opportunity to jump in there, and I loved it more than I ever thought that I would, because I was so bitter about it not having the time to dump into to get PvP gear, because I was always running with my PvE gear and just like, I could blow somebody up, but if they looked at me wrong, I, quivered like a leaf and died. So seeing, and I'm looking at a couple of screen grabs that I grabbed from the presentation earlier, like the talent system, the first talent that you get, Gladiator's Medallion, sounds like that's your trinket.
Right.
So you don't have to grind to get your trinket
altogether.
That is so amazing.
And it also means that they solve the racial imbalance that's been the huge plague for Arena of everybody has to play human, and gladiators are 98% humans because you need the trait so that you can free up your trinket slot. Well, now that's true for everybody.
Yep. So
instantly.
That's ingenious, yeah. The other screen grab that I've got is some of the abilities that are also being unlocked. It looks like they showed Shaman. Well, they pulled totems from Shaman pretty much, except for in theory of like, oh, I'm going to drop this totem, but it's basically just a cooldown. But I see Flame Tongue totem on here. I'm guessing it's probably going to do what it used to. There's also Necrotic Strike for Death Knight that replaces Scourge Strike.
So good.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff that they pruned that people were kind of pissed about, they're kind of sneaking it back in by replacing abilities in PvP. So they're working with stuff that we had before, but implementing in a different fashion to separate, the PvE from the PvP, which is cool because it's not so gating and daunting to have to grind out for months and months to get into the PvP game. You can just kind of drop it, get your honor, and go, and then not feel like a bonehead for, oh, I spent my honor on this thing, and I should have spent it on that. I bought a cloak because that was my weakest item instead of buying a trinket because I didn't realize I needed the escape. So I think it's more friendly to people that want to do both or haven't PvP before, and I like that.
Yeah, so KT, with these changes, will you be doing PvP in the next expansion?
I think more, yeah.
What about you, Crow and Kevin?
Kevin, go ahead.
All right. I mean, I would like to. In the good old day when Arena was new, I loved it. I did a ton. I never had more than 50 gold on my warrior in Burning Crusade because every time I had it, I was dropping it on a spec change because I was changing specs 4 and 5 times a day. Go from a 10-man raid spec to a PvP spec back to a 25-man raid spec. And I got to like a 2300, 2350 arena rating at one point. Like I played a lot of arena and then just dropped off the face of the earth because unless you started right at the beginning of the expansion and kept up with that gear grind, you couldn't. If that's not the barrier to entry, I could go play arena right now. I mean, when we turn this broadcast off, if I didn't have to worry about 3 months of gear to just be competitive, I would go do arena right now. I'm hopeful that there's lots of little things too about how arena will play out, like maybe not needing to have a separate talent specialization for PvP because I'm now going to have a PvP talent system, so I don't need a separate spec with my PvP talents and my PvP key bindings because I'm going to jump in and now my Scourge Strike is a Necrotic Strike and I don't have to worry about a bunch of extra setup. I can just zone into a BG and go play. And the less...
That's pretty huge.
It's huge, right? Like the less things I have to do to set up to play the game and the more I can just log in and be like, no, you know what? I feel like doing a skirmish. Boom, I'm in. Like, that's awesome. And I'm hopeful that they're going to take things like class balance into consideration in a big way there too, because my primary spec is tanking for raiding. And if I have to change, I have to change. But I would love to also see that spec have a place and a purpose in competitive PvP. If it can't, I understand that's fine. But being able to just say, okay, I'm going to hit my spec swap button and not have to stress about, okay, go find my PvP gear set, make sure I set up my new trinket macros, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, I can just turn on my other spec and go. It's the fundamental of what they've done with every other part of the game, which is just make it easy to go do what you feel like. The less time you spend flying there, getting set up, sorting out all the, like, did I bring the right potions? It's just let me play the game. Do what you can to let me just jump in and play the game. And if they've done that well, I'll do a ton more PvP in Legion.
Yeah. So
I think there's two parts of it that would make me sort of interested in PvP again, because I'm still neutral with Rin's Vanguard because I just haven't touched Ashran at all, and I have no desire to do so until Mercenary mode comes out. But like the two parts of it are this: I think that if the WoW team is able to take some cues from Team 1, the Heroes of the Storm team, if they're able to take some cues from that and be able to look at how the different heroes interact and how you've got some heroes that are tankier and some heroes that are more DPS oriented, and if you could translate that into how the different class specs play and interact in PvP, then I think that would be a really great way to do exactly what Kevin was talking about in terms of saying, well, you know, I play as a Shadow Priest, I don't want to respect a disc, I don't want to respect a Holy and be a healer in PvP in order to interact. I want to be able to go in there as a Shadow Priest and melt faces and have that be my thing that I do. So I think that I feel like Heroes of the Storm is a great place to look for how to execute that, but I also think that just how they make the gameplay still feel familiar, even when they're introducing these PvP-specific talents, is probably going to be the make-or-break component over whether or not you have people who haven't PvP'd in a long time or have never been interested in PvP, but now, you know, they see some PvP prestige reward like a special mount or a specific customization for their artifact weapon, that this motivates me to want to do PvP now, but am I going to be able to do it? Am I going to have any facility to do it along the same lines as what I'm doing in PvE? So I think that's going to be a big challenge for them. The other half of it, and this goes back to an earlier part where we were talking about, you know, disillusioned PvP players coming back, I think a lot of people have been burned by Ashram because I think that they had a lot. It's just been this huge project that Halinka and the guys have been working on, just the entire expansion. And, you know, I feel like if... they didn't say anything in the presentation about any PvP-specific content. We don't know if there's going to be a new Ashran or if there's going to be something else along those lines. So I'm interested to see if they're going to try the Ashran or Wintergrass project again, or are they going to do a new Battleground? What does that Battleground look like? Because PvP players want to have new content just as much as Raiders do. And aside from Ashran, which is largely not worked out terribly well, I'm curious to see if the team can deliver something that makes PvPers excited just about having a new vista to play on more than anything else. So I think that's definitely an unanswered question that we have right now going into the state of PvP for Legion for sure.
I agree.
I think you agree with Ashran because, like, I remember playing around with it on beta when it was a much smaller group of people going, and I loved it. I have YouTube videos of me just, like, gushing about how fun it was to go run in there because it felt like, from Wrath. Oh my god, I can see it in my mind, and I can't remember the name of it. Wintergrass. Like, yeah. It felt awesome like Wintergrass because I hated Tolbarad. I hated going out there. The only time that I went out to Tolbarad was to go get a Fox Kit pet. And once I got it, I never went back. So, like, my expectation for Ashram was really high because I enjoyed Wintergrasp. It was fun to go out and do PvP stuff and still not feel completely lost or useless completing PvE objectives. And then once Ashram went live and we had millions of players and thousands of players in there, it sucked. And it was lost and painful. And I only went in there a couple of times, and then again, I never went back because it didn't feel as good as it did when it was in a smaller iteration. Yeah. For a smaller group that was more balanced because there were people that were interested in playing around with things and testing it out and seeing how it felt instead of just, I need to do this thing to get X, to get my box, to get my gear, to go do my thing. You know, there was more passion in it than utilization. So
and the gear barrier has gone from that too, right? Every expansion since Wrath has had one of these big sort of PvP centric zones and functions in the game, and they've been for the most part very well received. They've been a lot of fun. Wintergrasp was great. I didn't hate Tolbarad. Ashran, I think, is at this point suffering from a stigma and a lack of long-term vision. They've just changed it so much and tried so many things to try to make it stick that at this point, I can't bring myself to care, frankly. But if we don't have to stress about being competitive, like going into Wintergrasp used to be a thing that was okay to do if you didn't have perfect PvP gear because you could man a siege vehicle or a defense turret or like contribute in some other way, or whatever your role was. And in modern PvP right now, that's just not the case, right? You can't go into instance PvP, you can't go into world PvP, you can't do anything without that pre-required gear that you can only get from doing PvP. So if that sort of like negative feedback loop has been eliminated where you can just go do it because you want to try it, because it's fun, because you want to enjoy it, that opens up a lot of creative space for them to say, yeah, we're going to make some awesome stuff. We're going to add new arenas, new battlegrounds, a new place to go. We're going to revisit the concept of Vault of Archivon and make it so that you want to control this place to go do this other like quick mini boss event, whatever. Like there's lots of things they can do with it to make it attractive to people, as long as you don't feel like you never have a shot. We've all been on that realm or on that faction where you know going in that you've lost before you start. And if they can kind of control for that with this gear thing, which I think they can, like, I'm more excited about this than I should be, honestly. Like, it's a really massive improvement to the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we can all definitely agree that the whole PvP changes in this next expansion is really a really big feature for the game and possibly for the health of the game as well. It really kind of took me... it surprised me, basically, that they were making this big of an overhaul to PvP. We should have seen it coming, and a lot of people who probably weren't me probably did see it coming, but I was really just surprised to see them really try to tackle PvP a little bit more, and they're probably going to really pin a lot more on esports and WoW now as well with these changes, which will be interesting also to see. But moving on, though, one of the things that we learned, and I think we talked about it earlier, is that it was announced that beta will happen sometime this year, later this year. We did not get an exact date on when that will be. That will probably, my guess would be, hopefully before BlizzCon, I would assume. I would actually hope like in the next month or two. But with what was revealed today, I think they have to be pretty close to beta, especially if they're going to release it this year. That probably leaves us at a release date Q1 of 2016, I would think. What do you guys speculate on that?
I'm right there with you on Q1 2016, just based on the fact that, like, for better or for worse, Blizzard doesn't want to cannibalize their own audience. You've got Legacy of the Void slated to come out, and its release window basically has to occur after BlizzCon and before the end of January, so that it doesn't have an impact on their competitive scene in WCS. So that's already basically locked in. Like, they haven't announced the date, but we're pretty confident.
It makes sense.
Right. We're pretty confident we're getting it at the end of this year. Overwatch is going to go into beta basically any moment. I mean, I won't be shocked if they announce a beta date on Saturday. So we're right on the cusp of Overwatch beta, which means they probably want that in people's hands at some point. Again, like, if not later this year, then for sure at some point early next year. So they have to figure out what comes first, Overwatch or a WoW expansion, and how fast can they tightly pack those two together, right? We don't want to, because we don't know anything about the monetization model for Overwatch, we can't say, but if it's, for the sake of argument, if it's a flat $60 purchase to buy the game, they can't release that and 3 days later release Legion, because they're just not going to sell as many copies of either as they would if they spaced those out. And they know that. So after StarCraft and before Overwatch is my guess, which plants it squarely like January 2016, maybe early February, with Overwatch beta kind of continuing a little bit longer and leading us to a release in late winter, early spring.
KT, you wanna?
I agree, just because if 6.2 is the final rating patch, we can't do another Siege of Orgrimmar, despite the fact that everybody is like, oh my god, Siege of Orgrimmar was the most ridiculously long thing ever. Like, every end expansion rating tier was almost, if not a year, pretty darn close or a little over. Like, it always has been, but Siege, I don't know, is just, it's the newest sore, bed sore, I guess, for people to complain about. But, and people are so bitter about Warlords in general. You know, the subs have almost dropped half, which is just astounding. But they need some time and separation to get away from Warlords before the movie. Like, I know the storylines are completely different, they're unrelated, but you have to have a strong presence in the game leading up to that movie. And since the movie's been pushed back from, you know, I think 5 or 6 months from when they originally slated it, it gives them time to build that and see, look how awesome this game is, and look how awesome the movie is, and capture that new audience. It's vital for a game that's this age, because it's literally an entirely different generation that's going to be grabbing onto it.
And the movie thing itself speaks to the fact that they're aware of this, because they moved the movie because it was going to conflict with Star Wars. Right. And they're not dumb, right?
And
like, they look in the mirror and they're like, we're all going to go watch Star Wars, so we probably shouldn't put our movie out when we're going to be watching Star Wars.
Right.
Exactly.
And then they moved it again because they moved it into the summer because the I don't remember the production name now. Legendary believes that it's going to be a summer blockbuster, because they originally had it in March and then they moved it back to the summer. Because I don't know if any of you saw the footage at BlizzCon last year, but that movie looks like it's going to be incredible. As far as special effects wise, it is definitely going to be a movie that they're going to pin up there as hopefully pinning to be a big summer blockbuster release. And I think they're more worried about that than they are with the game itself and the direction that the game is actually going. Of course, though, Blizzard will absolutely want to cash in on getting the game out before that movie comes out, because after people go watch that movie, they're going to come back and be like, man, I haven't played WoW in years, and that movie was awesome, and now I want to sub again.
I'm going to break with the panel a little bit, and I'm actually going to vote for Q2 of 2016 instead of Q1, just because, I mean, even the amount of time that Blizzard has spent doing beta tests for WoW expansions since forever has typically been around 5 to 6 months. So if we were going to have a Q1 release, like a reasonable Q1 release, we'd have to be ready to start beta, like, you know, within the next 6-7 weeks. That would be ridiculous. I don't think that's feasible. I mean, maybe
I don't think it's out
if
of the
they end
realm
up
of
showing us.
possibility, though.
Wait, what's that?
I said I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, though. Patches are done. They need to do it now.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm more willing to bet for an early quarter 2 release, which would position the beta test to be starting at around the same time that BlizzCon is happening. Like, I'd say that I'm more falling on the line of beta for Legion starting sometime in November, like probably right after BlizzCon's all wrapped up, because that way they can just say, okay, we're ready to go. Let's turn on the beta servers and run with it. I mean, it's not going to be much later than that because they need to get the beta servers up and running before they do their holiday break at the end of December. So I think that's going to play into things as well. But I think that quarter 2 is probably the best window at this point if they want to have the game on the market before the movie comes out. And I agree with JR that that's a really smart marketing move to do, to have the game out there and just ready to be purchased just right out the gate. Right. But I also agree that we can't stay in Hellfire Citadel anywhere close to the amount of time that we stayed in Siege, anywhere close to the amount of time we stayed in Dragon Soul. I mean, and that's the thing. The last raid of the last expansion always gets touted as the thing that we cannot do this again. You know, it can't be a year of Icecrown Citadel. It can't be a year of Dragon Soul. It can't be a year of all these other things. It's just kind of like Dragon Soul sucked more than Siege did. It was fewer bosses. It was reused assets. The boss fights, you know, for the most part, were not that interesting until you got to Deathwing, and then everyone got really sick of Spine because of Spine. So, like, it's just I think that when we're in the middle of Legion, people are going to be like, man, we can't go back to Hellfire Citadel. We can't do that again. It's going to be the worst. It's like, well, we're doing a Legion expansion. Even if we're not going to go back to Hellfire Citadel, we're probably going to have a raid that looks kind of like it.
It's so shiny and green.
Well, wouldn't you think, though, that, like, they said that they're going to put out pre-expansion content, though. Do you guys believe this will be a month before the release, or will they be releasing this content well ahead of time, possibly, to kind of almost be a, you know, quote-unquote 6.3, it just wouldn't have rating content. Because that's a possibility as well. Like, that could be something that they have queued up already and are ready to release, you know, maybe even around the same time that beta hits. What do you guys think of that? Is that a possibility?
Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, again, for me, it's 100% a release schedule timeline thing, right? If they're going to drop Overwatch beta right away here, the WoW beta probably waits a little bit because they want to get focus shifted to Overwatch and then back. They have to get to the other side of the 6.2.x PTR. So what I would love to see in that vein, JR, is I would love to see the beta drop pre-BlizzCon, because there's honestly no reason that it couldn't. I mean, it's probably going to be a very iterative beta. There's going to be a lot of changes happening really fast and furious, but there's no reason that they couldn't, you know, go there and get started, which would basically line us up to have a really nice 7.0 patch that could drop before, to Crow's point, before the sort of like holiday break occurs. Give us the new stuff. Let us get in there, start messing around, put the sort of tail end of Hellfire Citadel to bed with the new talents and things, the same way as we've done in every prior expansion for the last umpteen years, you know, the entirety of my adult life. And then, like, let's have that sort of early 2016 release for Legion lined up to sort of coincide neatly with that really like clean progression of, you can mess around in beta, now you got 7.0 on live, and now we're ready for you to pick up a box copy off a shelf, right, all in that sort of like 6-month window, starting probably in October and ending probably in like the end of February, worst case beginning of March. I can't imagine it being later than that, because honestly, we started Hellfire Citadel in June, and that felt like we didn't put a ton of time into Heimall before we had Foundry. It was, what, 3 months? We didn't put a ton of time into Foundry before we had Citadel. Again, 4 months. Like, each one of those tiers could have, and I'm calling them separate tiers, I said it, they could have each probably lasted another month easily. And then, yeah, if you were going to push Legion to, you know, summer of 2016, then no harm, no foul, because it still would be the shortest expansion ever. Warlords is already, basically no matter what they do, going to be the shortest physical expansion from launch to launch. So they just really need to solve that tier problem of don't make us feel like we were stranded in Hellfire Citadel with nothing in the pipe, which is why they're announcing Legion now. And the shortest window, I believe in memory, from first announcement to launch of a WoW expansion is 11 months.
Brief
So,
interruption. I have a sudden unexpected house guest. So I don't know. Put a block over me or something. I'll be right back.
okay. Um, yeah, so I mean, to Crow's point as he flees, normally we would expect the Legion expansion based on all history to drop probably in like July of 2016. They need it out earlier than that, in my opinion. Like I firmly believe it has to be sooner than that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sitting here watching Crows. I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of his little thing there, but oh well. We'll watch his house guest there. But but yeah. No, I agree. I think that's a pretty decent timeline. Sorry, Crow kind of threw me off there a bit, but no, I mean, yeah, we're definitely gonna see something in the next. We're definitely gonna see beta sometime in the next, this year. They've already said that. Gamescom has a huge presence this year with Blizzard, and do you guys know? Do they have WoW playable there?
They do, yes.
So this expansion, so you can go in, if you're at Gamescom, you can go in and play this right now.
I don't know if Legion is playable or if it's just Warlords or if they've got something, but they did WoW Stations, which is the first time that WoW has been like a playable demo at Gamescom, I think, ever.
Right.
Like, at least in terms of a new expansion.
Right. Yeah, no, because expansion has always been revealed at BlizzCon for WoW. But anyway, so what do you guys think about... Kevin, you kind of wanted to talk about this. What do you think about what hasn't been announced? What do you still want to see and need to see for this game, for this expansion, to be like, yes, this is the expansion that I want out of World of Warcraft? Do you think what has been shown already makes you think that? Or what else do you need from it?
I mean, in broad strokes, I think from a content perspective, from a feature perspective, they've struck a lot of high notes. For me personally, at least, I know there's a lot of people who are looking at it and saying, where are professions? Professions really got the short end of the stick in Warlords. Garrisons made them feel really neutered. We haven't had any sort of meaningful changes to the progression system since the introduction of archaeology in Cataclysm, I believe, is the last change to the profession system that occurred. So maybe it's time for something to happen there. And my guess is that we're just waiting. I don't think they've abandoned us on professions or gotten rid of them wholesale or anything. We just haven't heard what the vision is there yet. And I'm hopeful that we'll get that information fairly soon. There's a lot of mechanical things that I want to see. It's not so much that I'm unhappy with the game broadly, but I want to know mechanically for playability purposes, right? Like, what's happening to the stat system, right? There's been major stat changes every expansion to sort of solve for things they didn't like about what was on gear or how things worked. What's coming in Legion? Or are we just finally happy? Have we finally hit a place where they really like the balance of multi-strike versus versatility versus whatever? Are we getting another stat squish? That's something that they talked about a lot with Warlords and how they needed to do that to solve a lot of problems. And from a scaling perspective, we've already got people back up into the millions of health and stuff. Like, I presume that that's on the table. So I want to know more about that. We talked earlier about what's going to happen with legendaries. I don't know if they're going to do something with legendaries in the wake of artifacts. I'm curious to hear it. Flying is one that I've heard a lot of people say, okay, after the big about face and the debacle that was flying in Warlords, what's the goal of flying in Legion? I'm hopeful that they've just sort of learned their lesson and maybe we get another you have to finish the lore master to get it or whatever, but have that sorted out up front so that we don't go through that process again. Account-wide improvements is something that the game has gotten a little taste of pretty much every expansion. starting with Wrath, right? The introduction of achievements and all that kind of stuff. I would like them to see them go further. We were supposed to get the ability to manage our tabards using some kind of account-wide tool. It's probably still in the books somewhere. We could probably stand to see a rework of the rep system that took advantage of the account-wide technology that exists. Lots of stuff that could be done much better in that respect. Challenge modes. Is Legion going to have challenge modes? Challenge modes have been some of my favorite content since they were introduced in Mists, and I want more challenge modes. So are we going to get new challenge modes of the new dungeons in Legion? Presumably. Like, there's no reason we wouldn't, but just I want to hear that. I want to hear somebody say it. KT talked about scenarios. Are scenarios just dead in the water? We got this awesome new feature in Mists that was left to rot in Warlords with no indication of where it's going. Are they bringing scenarios back? I don't know. I would love to know that. Just any of this stuff sort of mechanically to tell us, like, which game are we playing when we get the Legion is really what I want to know. What things are they going to add, change, or remove? Because I'm excited about Demon Hunters, I'm excited about new raids, I'm excited about new zones, but I want to know more stuff about the nuts and bolts.
What kind of gamification is going to go in between the big sweeping changes, the big stuff? So,
Exactly.
and that's one of the things that Warlords fell flat on is like beautiful zones, great leveling experience, which I loathe more than I can possibly find not find work friendly words for. But I loved I loved the leveling, but it just fell so flat once you got there. And this is probably my least played expansion for real life reasons, but there wasn't anything that like, oh hey, I'm gonna sacrifice a couple of hours of sleep because I want to log in and go in and do stuff in game. It's just like, I'm busy. I don't need to log in, and I really haven't logged into WoW in like a few weeks. I'll admit it. There's nothing to draw me back in. So the stuff in between that seems menial, like dailies, or even like is simplified as the Half Hill farm was, because the Garrison farm isn't the same. It doesn't hit the same compulsions for me to do every day that Half Hill did. So yeah, finding out what that kind of gamification is to bring you back in between the sweeping stuff is very important. So
Hugely.
like the professions and everything that you mentioned, I completely agree. The fine tuning.
So Crow, you missed this question because you had that unexpected house guest. But basically, what we're talking about is, what would you still want to see? Like, if you're not completely sold yet on this expansion, on what we have seen revealed so far, what do you still want to see revealed to make this expansion go, yes, I'm going to buy into this, or are you pretty happy with what they've revealed so far?
I've definitely still got a lot of questions, like for sure. Like one of the things when Ian Hazukosta started talking about like dungeons and how they felt like they hadn't really delivered on dungeons and Warlords, I'm sitting here being like, yes, you failed to deliver. They were really pretty, but I've only seen each of them maybe a handful of times, and the expansion's been out for 8, 9, 10 months at this point. And it's like, once I got done with the dungeons and started getting into LFR or even getting into raiding, it's like I have zero reason to go back to these dungeons now. And he started talking along those lines, like he was going to say, here's what we're going to do with them, but instead he went into a list of just showcasing each, some of the dungeons that they're going to be adding. And it's like, it's great to have that showcase because it's great to sort of show off, here are the things that we're going to do, here are the places that we're going to go, but I'm still sitting here being like, what is going to make dungeons something that I'm going to want to run throughout the entirety of the expansion? And without even going into challenge modes, because challenge modes are cool. Mystic dungeons, difficulty for 5-mans is cool, but if I just want to get in and do like a nice 20, 30-minute dungeon run, and I don't want to do, and I've got no compulsion to do it for like rep or garrison resources or anything like that, then why am I going to go in there? If it's not for gear, if it's not for rep, and if it's not for resources, there's got to be. I am interested in a reward that makes 5-man dungeons into infinite content to a certain extent. So I'm really curious about how they're going to address that, because I think that's something that the game really needs, especially with how much resources they talk about has to go into dungeons. The reason why we don't get new dungeons and patch content is because they cost as much to produce as raids. So it's like, well, you know, if they cost that much to do, why don't we get more out of them? So what's the solution? What are you guys going to do in that respect? I'm interested to know that, definitely.
Yeah, because they talked about in the presentation that they really wanted to push out dungeons again, and they heard the player base that they want to make dungeons relevant. But they showed off the dungeons, but they didn't really talk about how they're going to make them relevant.
Yeah.
So that's a very good point. But anyway, Crow, I wanted to talk to you specifically about something we skipped earlier, because you weren't here with us yet. Back with Illidan coming back. I know that you have some very specific thoughts about this. First of all, how is it that Illidan is back? And what do you think about it?
Oh, man. Okay. All right. Okay. So this might get a little nitty-gritty for a little bit, so bear with me while I try to explain all of it. So what the net result of... Oh, wait, no. Let me start with this first. Okay. So the thing with Illidan, right, is that he's a demon hunter, and he's a night elf demon hunter, and back during the War of the Ancients, he decided to go pitch for the Legion for a little bit, and Sargeras was like, "You're a guy who's really clever, and I can use your tools, and you're really interested in magic? Well, I can give you magic. Here, I'm going to take away your eyesight, and I'm going to give you the ability to see all forms of magic, and then you work for me and do cool things." And Illidan's like, "Okay, cool, I will do this for you." And then later on, he realizes he's totally in love with Tyrande, and he helps him destroy the Well of Eternity, or something along those lines happens. The bottom line is that the Legion loses, and Illidan is still there, and he still doesn't have any eyeballs. And then Illidan messes something up. He creates a new Well of Eternity using these vials that he stole, and Malfurion and Tyrande are like, no, you messed up. This is a terrible idea. We're going to put you in a jail with Maeve Shadowsong watching over you for 10,000 years because she hates your guts, and you're also a tool. So Illidan is in a hole for 10,000 years, and when he comes out, because Tyrande is like, hey, the Legion is attacking, and we could totally use this guy who knows how to fight demons, we're going to pull him out, and he's going to fight for us. But Illidan's just kind of like, yeah, okay, I'll go ahead and fight, and then I'll kill Tichondrius and do things. And he eats the skull of Gul'dan and, becomes a demon hunter who can turn into demons. And he becomes progressively more demonic with all of the power that he continues to nom on over time. So that's why he's got the appearance that he has. He's got the demon wings. He's got the hoofed feet, which night elves don't normally have. So Illidan becomes progressively more and more of a demon as time goes on. And that's part of him being a demon hunter, and that's something that we get with demon hunters to a certain extent in the game as going forward. What we've been told about the nature of demons throughout the history of Warcraft as a franchise is that they are actually anchored to the Twisting Nether. That is why when we kill dreadlords, like the Nathrazim, they disappear, their bodies disappear, and they just go back to the Nether, and that's why they can get summoned back in later, which is why none of the Dreadlords that we've ever killed turn out to actually be permanently dead. So fast forward a little bit, and Draenor is destroyed and becomes Outland, and Outland is supposed to be partially in the Twisting Nether. We're given this bit of information that the only way to permanently destroy a demon is to kill it in the Twisting Nether. Illidan is mostly a demon, probably pretty much full demon at this point, all things considered. And when we kill him at the Black Temple in Outland, we're in the Twisting Nether, and then we kill Illidan, who's a demon, whose soul is anchored to the Twisting Nether. So doesn't that mean that Illidan's like really, really dead? I mean, if he's a demon and we kill him in the Nether, then he's permanently dead. If he's not a demon and we kill him in the Nether, then he's dead, because you kill someone and they aren't a demon and they're dead permanently. So there's this whole big confusion, I think, about how can we even bring back Illidan without completely, upending some aspect of the story that we've understood about his nature and his death over the course of the last 11 years? And it's just, my mind just crumples at the prospect of trying to unpack all of that. It blows my mind.
Is Black Temple actually in the Twisting Nether?
The Black Temple is an Outland. Outland is supposed to be in the Twisting Nether. That was part of the explanation for the place back during Burning Crusade. So yeah, that's where he's supposed to be. That's where the whole continent's supposed to be, from what I understood.
I just thought it was heavily tied to it, but not actually existing in it because lore isn't my thing, and I didn't play in Burning Crusade because I'm a Wrath baby. But that's just my understanding, is that it's not actually in. It's just that's kind of what keeps the little floating rocks still together.
Yeah, and I think
because it was Draenor, you know.
Yeah, that degree of confusion is probably what Afrasiabi and some of the other lore bores on the WoW team are probably going to play with. It's like, well, it's not completely in the Nether. We can squeeze out this one possibility that allows Illidan to still be alive because we want to use him again now in Legion in order to introduce demon hunters and have a fight with Gul'dan because apparently Gul'dan just can't work with people. Maybe he's not a people person. I like that we're finally going to kill the fucker, by the way.
This version of him.
Yeah, we'll get another version of him at some point, I'm sure.
I mean, that engages this other story that I thought of.
8.0, Gul'dan makes another Lich King.
Yeah.
Gul'dan's Electric Boogaloo.
But I mean, it looks like Illidan is in his prison though, because when they showed the cinematic, Gul'dan, it looks like he was going up to the prison and releasing Illidan. I mean, that's what it looked like to me.
It looks like
shine the light on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
my question is this the Illidan from the other time? Is he possibly still alive in the other time, and then he comes back, or did we just never really kill him at all?
Okay, so one of two things categorically has to be true, right? I am basically convinced that the nature of the quote-unquote time travel that has occurred in Warlords of Draenor has no meaningful bearing on present-day Azeroth because Draenor explodes, okay? Draenor goes away. So we go back and we mess around on Draenor and we pull some people back through the portal with us or not, as the case may be. But fundamentally, the events of Draenor, bar what we bring back with us to Azeroth, don't matter. They occur on a planet that literally blows up. So inconsequential, okay? They are Alderaan and they're going to be fucking dust in space somewhere. Excuse my French. I don't care, right? So what we have to presume from the cinematic teaser that we were shown is Gul'dan at some point comes into Azeroth, right? And has access to the tomb where... tomb, and we are going to get confusing with the terminology here. The prison where Illidan was being kept. So either Illidan never died, which doesn't line up with Crow's theory. In theory, right? We don't 100% know this, like, Twisting Nether Outland thing is a for sure thing. We don't know, is Illidan 48% demon or 51%, and does it matter? Like, there's a lot of just little details there that I'm sure they're going to play off of. But I have to assume that basically what has happened here is Gul'dan has come through, found Illidan back in the prison where he was placed by Maiev after the events of Black Temple, because he either is a demon and cannot die and Outland is not the Twisting Nether, or because he never died. And this would not be the first time that we've had a retcon where a character appeared to be dead and was not actually dead. Black Temple was merely a setback type of thing. And if that's the case, then so be it. I don't think it really matters. Basically, I don't think we destroyed Illidan. I don't think Illidan was fundamentally finished when we killed him. The chat is saying that, yeah, like the version of events on the WoW site right now is that Illidan disappeared and we don't know the fate of his remains. So by that extension, they take it back, they put it in the prison, Gul'dan comes through, plays with the prison, and he's back.
Yeah, the chat has been very angry with us for the last 2 minutes. So they keep yelling at me that I haven't been reading the chat. But guys, I'm reading the chat, but we're having a discussion, so I don't want to interrupt these guys. Okay.
Yeah, fundamentally, like it doesn't have a really huge impact on the story, other than for us to find out at some point over the course of the next little while leading up to Legion's release, whose side is Illidan batting for? Because I don't know if we're on a redemption arc with him or if we're gonna re-kill him holding Gul'dan's new skull. Like, I don't know. And I'm curious to find out, honestly. Like, I think he's a very interesting core villain to the story, and I know that they've had kind of a struggle with iconic villains over the course of the game's entire lifespan. They got to introduce and mess with tons of characters in Warcraft 3, and then when they brought them forward into WoW and they started having to be characters that we would kill because they're at odds with our goals as players, I don't think they're actually happy about that. Like, I don't think they ever wanted to get rid of Illidan or Arthas or Deathwing. Like, it's really hard to see those characters go away because we're not replacing them. We're not introducing new epic villains to get excited about, which is basically the whole premise of Warlords was, shit, we're out of villains, what do? Let's go back to the Warcraft 2 manual, haul out all the cool war chiefs from the old clans, and slap them all together and call them bosses. Like, and I have no problem with that, but that I want to see the story move forward. Like, I want this to actually advance the story past the point that we've sort of been trapped in, where we keep circling the drain with the same 4 core villains over the course of the last, like, 8 years.
Like I keep saying, Jaina's a dreadlord.
Jaina's not a dreadlord.
I want to kill her so bad.
I don't.
I have
want
a
to
sick
kill her
obsession.
So bad. God, Jaina's my girl. We've thought about this before, KT. Jaina's my girl.
This will never end. I want to see her fall.
No.
So the one last thing that I wanted to talk about, and Crow, this was something that I read on Twitter earlier. The very last thing that Alex, I can never pronounce his last name.
Afrasiabi.
Yes. The very last thing he said is that Ilaria and I can't pronounce his name. What's that?
Tyrion.
Yes, thank you. I'm having difficulty with words today. Will be in this expansion. They will be here. We'll finally figure out what happened to them. And Crow, I'm wondering if you can give a short explanation of who they are and why this is such a big deal. Because there are people that have played WoW that have never even heard of these characters.
Okay, brief explanation. Way back in Warcraft 2, they introduced several iconic characters who were sort of proto-hero units. For the most part, they weren't really much better than the units that you could build, but they were named characters, they had unique emotes, they played a role in the story, and to a great extent, they were the heroes that the story, to a certain extent, centered around for the sake of Warcraft 2. And then in Beyond the Dark Portal, the expansion to Warcraft 2, those characters became more of a focus and were capitalized on even more heavily throughout the rest of the expansion. I might be messing that up. Maybe they weren't introduced until Beyond the Dark Portal. I can't remember. But Ilaria is an Elven Ranger. She is Sylvanas' sister. I forget exactly what the birth order is, but the bottom line is that they're siblings. She married Tyralion, who is a human paladin who worked for Anduin Lothar. And when Lothar was killed at the Battle of Blackrock Mountain against the Horde, Tyralion rallied the troops and led the Alliance to victory so that they could finally defeat the Horde at the end of the Second War. So the two of them get married, or not really get married. I guess the two of them, they hook up. They're dating. And Tyralion and Khadgar and Ilaria and Danath Trollbane, they all form this Alliance expeditionary force to pursue the Horde on to Draenor to fight against them there, because Ner'zhul had put the Horde back together again himself after their defeat and was doing some stuff, and the Alliance decided, no, we should totally go there and we should beat the crap out of these guys because we don't know what they're doing. So throughout the course of Beyond the Dark Portal, Tyralion and Ilaria and all of their friends are fighting to contain Ner'zhul. Ner'zhul ultimately ends up opening up all the portals that then destroy Draenor. And the entirety of the Alliance Expeditionary Force is trapped on Draenor at this point. And we don't see them again until Burning Crusade. Years later, when we come into Burning Crusade, Alliance characters roll up to Honor Hold, we meet Danath, and there's a character that has apparently rolled along with us, named Arator the Redeemer, who's supposed to be a half-elf paladin. He's walking around in Tier 2 Judgment. He's a really pretty Blood Elf character. He's really obvious. You can go there right now and you can see him. You can see what he's about. He has a ton of emotes interacting with a bunch of NPCs, including Danath around Honor Hold. And the idea is that he's saying, hey, look, Ilaria and Turalyon are my parents. I'm trying to find them. They're supposed to be here. Where the hell are they? And Danath is sitting there being like, I don't know where he is, kid. I haven't seen him in years. And so these two characters, these iconic characters from the RTS games, when virtually all of the other iconic characters from the RTS games, from Beyond the Dark Portal at least, have been addressed in some fashion during Burning Crusade, these two characters are addressed, are referenced, and then never show up, never appear. And so it's not just that you have RTS players that are saying, hey, where are these characters that I remember from the RTS games 20 years ago? You have people who came in with Burning Crusade, or who came in with WoW or Warcraft 3 and then got to Burning Crusade and are introduced to the idea of these characters and the mystery of where they went to, and then we've never heard bupkis about them since. And it's come up so many times. I have asked the question myself to Metzen and Afrasiabi, where the hell are these guys? And it's always just kind of like, just
wait.
It's a loading screen tip. Where are they?
No one has seen Ilaria and Turalyon in years.
Which is really unfortunate, because they were super core characters in the Beyond the Dark Portal story. They were immensely important to the Sons of Lothar and that whole situation when they went over to Outland to try to deal with Ner'zhul before he messed the whole thing up, and his spirit became the eventual Lich King. All of these things have come full circle, and now, because of Warlords of Draenor, in some cases, come full circle twice, and we've never had a chance to really resolve what happened to Ilaria and Turalyon. And I know even some of the devs were making snarky tweets after Ilaria became an option for the Hearthstone Hunter hero. There it is. That's where she's been all this time. You happy now? It's become its own running gag. So to finally get some closure on that is really cool, because honestly, if you go back and you play the classic RTS stories, you see a lot of stuff. There's a really good series done by a Hearthstone guy named Disguised Toast. He does the Lord of the Cards, and he goes back and he does the history of Sylvanas, and it goes right back to who they were in Warcraft 2, all the way through all the cutscenes and stuff in Warcraft 3. Warcraft 3 had this massive scope of story that did everything to set all of these characters up. You meet every single character you'll deal with throughout the entirety of the World of Warcraft and all of its subsequent expansions. It set up all these things, and so yeah, we always wanted closure we never got for these characters that are finally back after, like Crow said, 11, 12 years of just nobody knows. Total absence.
Yeah. So, okay, we kind of went and we talked about the lore, we talked about the new things that are coming in, we talked about the weapon artifacts, the new level cap, we talked about the new class of demon hunters, PvP. We talked about pretty much everything that was revealed to us today so far, and there's going to be more news coming later this week. We'll probably be learning more about this throughout the rest of this week and going into BlizzCon. Speaking of BlizzCon, with them announcing so much stuff at Gamescom this week, like we talked about right at the beginning of the show, that this really felt like BlizzCon. So what do they have saved up for BlizzCon? What do you guys think we're going to see at BlizzCon? We'll start with Crow.
Man.
Sucker.
All right. Honestly, it's hard to say. I think that the opening ceremonies are going to be what's great about what's going to be happening in the opening ceremony is that there are all of these irons that they're going to have in the fire at that point. The Overwatch beta should be in progress by that point, and if it hasn't started, it'll start imminently after it. So they'll definitely be talking about, they'll definitely have something new to show about Overwatch in advance of Overwatch's release. And I think the same thing can be said for Legion. Now that they've announced Legion, and it doesn't have to be the centerpiece of the show, it can be something that they can talk about more. Maybe we see the entirety of the cinematic and not just a minute teaser of it. That can something that can happen in the opening. Maybe we'll see something very substantial for Legacy of the Void, because by that point, if we don't know the release date, we're if we don't know the release date by that point, something's wrong. I think we'll know the release date at Gamescom. I think I'm fairly confident we will. We may see something for Hearthstone. We may see some new stuff for Heroes of the Storm. I've seen some people say that they might have another IP to announce, and I'm just like, another one? Like, you guys just talked about Overwatch and about how you guys never do new IPs, and you start doing Overwatch all of a sudden. It's like, but are they going to do something new? Something else that's new? What the hell even is it? Just the mind boggles at the possibilities because it's Blizzard.
Right. What do you think, KT? What are we going to see at BlizzCon?
I think we'll probably see more fleshing. If we don't see a beta before then, we'll see more fleshing out of stuff that they haven't. I think we'll have something. I would love to see, like, what's playable at BlizzCon be the Demon Hunter starting zone, or whatever the entry stuff is. Because I think, what were we seeing after they announced Warlords 2 years ago? It was well, at least Horde side, it was going into Frostfire. So we're either going to see what's going to launch us into the Broken Isles, because I'm guessing that's where we start off at, or we're going to see Demon Hunter starting stuff. Maybe.
What do you think, Kevin?
I mean, it's beating a dead horse a little bit, but I think, again, it just comes down to the logistics of the timetable of all of the games, right? We will be at a point by the time we get to BlizzCon where Hearthstone should be due for another update, with Legacy of the Void having entered beta on March 31st. Looking at a roughly like 6 or 7 month beta window, it should drop. I mean, they won't want it to release before BlizzCon, likely, because of the WCS, so they'll choose to have it come out shortly afterwards, the way that Warlords came out shortly after the last BlizzCon. With Legion announced today, they kind of have to sort of just talk about Legion, because even if it's releasing in early 2016, at that point, it's just going to be major playable demos and get everybody really hooked into it. Because I can't really fathom, like, my worst case scenario at this point is that they wait until BlizzCon to launch the Legion beta and they have nothing else WoW related to talk about, which would be a real sort of paradigm shift for BlizzCon to not have anything WoW centric at all to showcase, and it being really about the other games more exclusively. Here's the Storm, I think, is going to get a big presence because it's really blowing up and doing really well. There's going to be lots of new content there, likely some StarCraft-centric stuff to queue up to sort of go alongside the Legacy of the Void, which is already sort of a known quantity at this point, which just leaves Overwatch to really kind of, hopefully, if it doesn't have a release date this weekend, be well into its beta cycle and get a release date. And then maybe we get a Diablo expansion. Like, the Diablo team is kind of in this weird place where they've dumped all their resources into 2-3, but there's nothing on the horizon beyond that. So presumably, whether it's...
That we know.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, we know that they're working on something. Whether it's another expansion or something else, we don't really know. But presumably, we're going to get some tease of what's coming next in that vein. But it seems like not a lot, right? It seems like little content drippings for Hearthstone and Heroes do not a BlizzCon make. So the new IP theory, honestly, wouldn't have held any credibility before last year, and now I think holds a ton of credibility. Like, absolutely, they could be working on a new game or a new franchise that we just aren't aware of.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with that. I think we're going to see the Diablo 3 expansion 2, for sure, because just for the fact Diablo wasn't even anywhere at Gamescom. I feel like they're going to announce their next expansion at this BlizzCon. We're obviously going to get more information.
As a brief interruption, if you want Diablo news, there's still all of this Diablo stuff that's happening in Heroes of the Storm, so you're kind of getting your Diablo there, but it's not actually Diablo games. But you're right.
Yeah,
Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, and we'll hear more about the other games, but I think that they're saving a really big item for BlizzCon. And I'm going to have to jump on the new game / new IP train. I think I've actually been saying that for a year now, and I think it's, like Kevin said, I think it's starting to hold more credibility that we might see what it is. What it is, I don't know. Last year I was able to predict that, Overwatch was going to be Overwatch, it was going to be an FPS. I assumed wrongly that it was going to be Michael Booth leading the team. I didn't expect it to be Titan remastered. With Kaplan leading the team. I did not expect that, but I think we're going to see something big at BlizzCon with as much stuff as they've been announcing at Gamescom. So to wrap things up here, so we talked fully about this expansion reveal today. Based on what you guys saw today, and based on how you think it will go, how are you feeling? Once again, scale 1 to 10, 1 being meh, 10 being super hyped up, ready to go. How are you feeling about this expansion right now, as of what we saw today? I'm going to start with KT.
9, because I want to see what else there is, so I can't call it a 10. But like I'm so excited. Like I can't wait till I get back to Irvine because I want to go hug my friends on the WoW team and be like, this is fucking amazing! Ah! So yeah, I'm really excited.
Nice. Crow, how about you?
I would have to. I agree with KT to a great extent. I want to hug everybody on the dev team, which they probably would welcome far less from me than from her, oddly enough, because she comes bearing cookies.
I do come bearing cookies. I've gone into fun adventures because cookies.
I am definitely interested in seeing what else is in store for this expansion. I am really ready to be done with Warlords because I feel like Warlords did a lot of stuff, and I am not as angry about Warlords as a lot of people are, but I think that that I'm ready to leave this space and move on into what's happening next. I am eager to do that. So I would have to say that I'm definitely at an 8.5 or a 9 when it comes to Legion. There are still unanswered questions. There's stuff that I want to know more about, and I'm hoping that this is not all that there is to it. I really want to. I'd like to have a clearer sense of, are we going to have another 2 or 3 tiers? Are we going to have a 3-tier expansion, or are we going to have a 2-tier expansion? Because Warlords was a 2-tier expansion. It's the shortest they've ever done. So I
still argue it was 1 tier, but sure.
Hellfire is another tier. But the bottom line is that it's short. It's short. We didn't have our nice sort of like sideshow tier like Ulduar or Firelands or anything like that. So I want to know, are we going to have a sideshow tier somewhere in Legion? And is it going to be Trolls? Because we still haven't finished stuff up with King Rastakhan yet, so there's totally an option there that they could address that if they felt like it, and I think that that could be a thing if they're not going to spin that guy to a whole expansion on his own, which
we're going to get Trolls to test the metal of Vol'jin.
Yeah.
Trolls. How about you, Kevin? Scale 1 to 10. Where's your hype level?
I mean, honestly, a solid 8. And the only points I'm docking it, honestly, for me are, as we talked about at some length already, I want a lot more mechanical information. I want the nuts and bolts of this expansion. The hype train stuff for me is great, but it's the same as, you know, when any expansion to any of the Blizzard franchises announced, they're all, yay, we have a new thing. And I'm sitting here going, okay, I want to know, what are the new cards? What are the new heroes? What spells do they get to cast? What things do we get to do? All this mechanical stuff is what matters to me. I want to know answers to tough number crunchy questions that will allow us to get really enthusiastic about the as KT put it earlier, the gamification of the game, like the actual what I get to do and how I push buttons is the stuff that really will get me energized. I have no disrespect at all to Blizzard for Warlords. I actually probably have put more time into Warlords as an expansion than anything since Burning Crusade. Which I know sounds insane. I played a lot of Burning Crusade, which is part of the problem, but it for me has been a great expansion because the raid content has been really good. I have found a really good sort of niche in the game that I really enjoy. I even liked Garrisons, which I know is basically unspeakable, but the ability to log into the game and get value out of 5 minutes when you only had 5 minutes, it's the first time that WoW achieved that, and honestly, I think raw login count grew exponentially, and people were stickier in their frequency with which they revisited the game, which was a huge priority for the dev team. It cost them some obvious things, and they have some lessons to learn from it. But I'm really happy with what Warlords did to the game, mechanically speaking, which makes me really excited for what Legion can do to build off of it. And if they can go better places, if some of the things we talked about earlier with like the PvP changes and stuff make it in, WoW could be the most playable game it has ever been. And I can geek lore, but I don't care if the game is good, right? If the raw gameplay will sustain me, we can shoot flying laser cows and I don't care. Like, that's fine. I just want the game to be fun. And right now it looks like it's going to be maybe the most fun it's ever been.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a little lower than you guys did, and like I'm really excited for Demon Hunters as a playable class. That is something
Totally.
that I have wanted since WoW was in beta. Like, I thought that was going to be a class that they added to the game originally, and so that has me excited. But I'm gonna give it a 7, and that's for the simple fact that we've been on this hype train before with Warlords. People were really excited about Warlords. People went in and bought, Warlords like crazy. It was up over 10 million subscribers, and they did not deliver like they should have. Now, I have faith that Blizzard could deliver with this expansion, but I don't. It's kind of that fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, fool me twice, shame on me. I'm speaking like George Bush here all of a sudden. But yeah, it's one of those things where I don't know. I feel a little let down with Warlords, that I don't feel as good about this expansion, and I'm hoping that they prove me wrong. With that said, I put it at a 7 for sure.
I will say one thing, and I know this has been sort of a core theme of a lot of the feedback towards Warlords, is that people felt like lots of content was cut, and that was a big letdown. The game was too short, and that was a letdown. Trust was broken by the fact that subscriptions blew up because there was so much hype and excitement, and they did a really aggressive and very successful marketing campaign, and then the delivery was a letdown. Like, I think if Blizzard had just said less, that feeling, right? That sort of like, I was expecting this and got that, wouldn't have been there, and the subscription drop-off wouldn't have been as dramatic. I think Blizzard did the right thing, honestly. I think they built a game that drew a lot of people back, created a lot of excitement. The swell around Warlords was the biggest that WoW had seen since Wrath. They didn't have enough to sustain it, and I honestly believe that lesson has been learned. So I feel like criticizing them at this point for Warlords not having sort of that like evergreen feel to it and being long in the tooth earlier than a previous expansion might have been is a little bit disingenuous, but it also plays a lot, I think, off the fact that, I mean, we're all sitting here talking about this game, people in our late 20s, mid 30s, like, we're different people than we were when WoW came out. And the whole player base has grown up with this game and leads a totally different lifestyle. We're asking for the game that we had 10 years ago, but we're not going to ever get it because we can't be the people we were 10 years ago. And honestly, the game is doing so much to facilitate your ability to appreciate it in smaller doses so that it's still accessible to you and playable by someone who can't invest 40 hours a week into competitive rating or whatever it used to take for people who were really like serious about it. The game is as digestible as it's ever been. It has the most content it's ever had. Its scope is unimaginable at this point to somebody to try to build a game like this from scratch. It can't be done. So, I mean, credit where credit's due. I think we have to just look back and say, this is awesome. What we have in front of us is super exciting. I'm prepared to give them the benefit of the doubt on what Legion can deliver. And I think you're going to see that in the sales of the expansion. Almost 300,000 people tuned in to watch the announcement on Twitch. Bark, 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 bark. So, like, everybody wanted to see what's coming. There's a ton of hype already around expansion the next. This is a good thing for the game, to build this hype, to build this energy. I don't want to see that lost because we're disappointed that Warlords wasn't perfect.
No, and I agree. I will give them the benefit of the doubt. If I didn't, I would have probably scored it a little bit lower than that. So I do have faith that Blizzard will try to make things right. We'll just have to see how this goes for sure. So anyway, I just wanted to thank you guys for hopping on here. I mean, we talked a lot longer than I expected. I want to thank the chat room for coming up. A ton more people showed up than I expected. I was expecting maybe 50.
Well, it's only a little over 500 right now.
500,
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy.
Now I'm embarrassed. I had no idea we had that many people in the chat room.
A lot of people.
I
Yeah.
should have put makeup
Hi,
on or brushed
everybody.
my hair. Oh no.
Yeah, they all showed up when you started talking about lore.
I didn't
so
comb
there's
my
a lot.
beard either, so it's fine.
But anyway, you can follow me.
Hey, I put clothes on.
Right. That
And you
did
know
happen.
what, KT? Thank you for putting clothes on.
We appreciate that.
Respect.
Anyway, you can follow me at Eldorian. You can follow at BlizzPro on Twitter as well. This is our BlizzPro team. One of our Warcraft writers at Unlimited Black, at KTJN Wow, and at Lack of Realism. He is one of my co-hosts on Well Met, which you can watch every Sunday night here on this channel as we talk about all things Hearthstone, and maybe we'll get to talking about some WoW sometime. So anyway, thanks again for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
you.